because most of the supplements and stuff that we know in the space, what they do is they increase dopamine by stopping the breakdown of dopamine. But what we found with modafinil, it actually produces more dopamine.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to our focus on nootropics here at Think Big Bodybuilding Media. I'm Scott McNally, and of course, I'm with our nootropics guru, Prady, from our sponsor, Azoth. Today, we are going to talk about modafinil. We'll basically talk like what modafinil is. We're going to discuss how it works, what the side effects are, and we might be able to figure out like what the differences are between this and other drugs like Adderall. So we're going to make this brief, and I've got a lot of questions about the analogs. We'll discuss like all the different adrafinil and FL modafinil, all those things on another show. So Prady, what's up, man? How you been, brother?
Scott, good to be here, man, and glad to continue the series.
Great to have you, brother. I'm excited for this one. We got some really good insight and feedback from the viewers on our first installment with Zynamite, and we had a lot of talk about modafinil and the analogs of modafinil. So You thought it would be best if we just start with like modafinil, what that is first, and then we could branch off to the others in the future.
Yeah, and I guess I want to start off with when people think about modafinil, they think it's like something that's like something gray market that you got to get, it's illegal, or like where is this from? Is this like, what is it exactly? So I just wanted to put it out there. This is a scheduled pharmaceutical drug. Okay. So that's really important to know. And that's our conversation is going to go from there. And no matter how you feel about that, one of the good things for the scientific community is when something is a pharmaceutical drug, you have the known side effects. There's been clinical trials. So it makes it easier to talk about this kind of stuff as opposed to when something isn't really known. You have a lot of anecdotal evidence. So what is modafinil? Why was it even like, what is it approved for? So back in the 1980s, there was a big thing about narcolepsy. So narcolepsy is a disorder where you just fall asleep like at all times. Like you're at work, you fall asleep, all the times you just feel like you want to sleep all the time. Yeah. And, scientists were like, well, we've got to solve this problem because so many people have it. And so they came out with a drug, which was modafinil, and the FDA approved it about 1983. So that's what it's approved for. It's still prescribed right now for narcolepsy. And they figured out that people who have these disorders of sleeping, as there's disorders where you just can't sleep, and there's disorders where you just sleep too much, and that's what narcolepsy is. They figured out it has to do something with dopamine. It's something we talked about a lot on our previous episode, but we know that dopamine is really important for the reward and pleasure part of the brain and getting you to just do things. So one of the interesting studies about dopamine, which was referenced in the studies back in the day, which was when you have mice and rats who have no dopamine, you can put food next to them and they just won't eat it. They'll starve themselves to death. Like they just don't want it. So
no kidding.
Anything that's even good for them, if you put it right next to you, you just won't do it. So people who have very low levels of motivation, they just can't get themselves to do anything. They have low levels of dopamine, and they figured out that low levels of dopamine had something to do with a consistent, willingness to go to sleep. And we know people who are depressed, either they just can't go to sleep or they just want to sleep all the time. You're just like, I want to go to sleep, and you just don't want to participate. And we know dopamine plays a role with it. So they put out this drug. Now, what's interesting is this drug was approved in the 80s. So the rigorous, studies and clinical trials, while they were important at the time, what we don't know still is exactly how it works. So there isn't a whole lot of host of things of like how it works. But one of the things we do know is that dopamine is increased in the brain when you take it. And this not only happens from stopping dopamine from metabolizing, but also the drug actually creates new dopamine, which is really interesting because most of the supplements and stuff that we know in the space, what they do is they increase dopamine by stopping the breakdown of dopamine. But what we found with modafinil, it actually produces more dopamine. And we know that's pretty novel, and that's why this is something that's interesting for people who are into nootropics.
Interesting. All right. So from there, then, what are the potential side effects of this? Because I know we had talked before. You said that was something that people are very interested in.
Yeah. So when people think about modafinil, it's usually a lot of people who use Adderall or some type of other harder stimulants. And one thing we've noticed is like, this is not a stimulant. But I just said, hey, we don't know how it works. So how do we know this is not a stimulant? Look at the side effects, right? So we can see the side effects that people get from Adderall because it's studied, because it's a prescription drug. And we also have studied side effects from modafinil because it's also a prescription drug. So what we've noticed is that the side effects you get with modafinil, a lot of people say there's no side effects. I disagree. There are shown side effects are going to be things like headaches, insomnia. There's a very small population that has gotten Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which is where 10% of your outer layer of your skin actually starts peeling off. It's a skin disorder. Now, when we compare that though to Adderall, it's very different, because in Adderall you start getting like loss of appetite, high blood pressure, a lot of the stuff you see with stimulants. Yeah. And also you start getting a lot of psychiatric issues, like people start hearing voices, hallucinations, people who have bipolar disorder, it starts to be more exacerbated. So these are things that we see more frequently with stimulants. Yeah. And those are the side effects you don't get with modafinil. So we kind of know it's not a stimulant. So we've basically created a new category. We say, well, this is a wakefulness agent. It's not a stimulant. So there are side effects with it, so we have to be kind of careful for. One of the major side effects for people on an everyday basis will say, well, I'm not getting Stevens-Johnson syndrome. If you're on birth control or anything like that with your hormones, it can affect it in some way. We have seen that it cancels out birth control a lot of times, especially for females using it.
Really? I didn't know
so
that.
It's something to just be careful of. We don't know the exact interaction, but we know that's one of the known side effects. But interesting about it is it's not a stimulant. So for people who don't like that kind of harsh effect that Adderall gives them or some stimulants give them, modafinil might be a better use. Again, this is a prescription drug, and obviously we're not here to provide medical advice. This is something we just know from the side effects that we're seeing that are reported.
Interesting. And the half-life on this is like really, really long too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really long. They say it's anywhere from 10, 12 hours, sometimes longer. Yeah. So it does last in your system a lot. I wouldn't recommend people, when you're taking it off label, you're kind of on your own, but just be careful and mindful of the dosage and kind of how you start. Again, it's something, if you're on a prescription, talk to your doctor about it, but just be careful with the dosage because it does last long. This is not just a caffeine pill, it's a prescription drug, so it's a little bit harsher. So don't treat it the same way. That'd be the first thing, I would say. And, people ask you, well, okay, nootropics, they're smart drugs. They help on your brain function. They help with cognition. Does this really help with cognition? And so there are some studies out there, and what they've shown is what it does help with is it decreases impulsive decision making. So sometimes in our life, like we're just in a bad mood or bad spot, and we just make rash decisions. And we've seen that it reduces your likelihood of making impulsive decisions. So it helps with better decision making and better reaction time. Yeah. But we haven't seen that it actually helps you retain more information or perform better at tests. So it has a very interesting mechanism where it can help you with better decision making, reaction time. So that's why we see people in the military oftentimes using it, and where they're abandoning Adderall and starting taking modafinil. But when it comes to cognition and being a real quote unquote smart drug, which is it's going to help you perform better at tests, memory retention, we haven't really seen that yet. Doesn't mean it doesn't work that way. No, it doesn't mean that. It's just that we haven't seen those studies yet. And the same thing with Adderall, we haven't seen those studies yet that it actually helps with cognition.
Okay. Interesting. It sounds like this probably about wraps us up. This has been a good little chunk of information. We want to keep this pretty short. Is there anything else that we should let the viewers know about modafinil? Because I feel like this is pretty complete.
Yeah, no, this pretty much wraps it up. Be careful when using it. It's a prescription drug. It's a Schedule 4 prescription drug, which means has lower level of abuse and tolerance buildup and addiction, a little bit lower than Adderall. Consult with your doctor about it if you feel like this is something that can help you if you have narcolepsy or anything like else. But it's an interesting drug. And it just takes us more to the gateway of other stuff that we have in the nootropic space, and hopefully helps people understand more how nootropics really work, because people are a little bit confused. And one of the things that I wanted to do on these episodes is give people a better understanding of what they are in the first place, because there's a lot of confusion. Is it a stimulant? Is it a wakefulness agent? What are nootropics really? And by breaking down the different nootropics that are very popular, hopefully people will get more clarity on it. And so that's pretty much wraps it up, man.
All right, that sounds good. And guys, of course, Prady, he's the owner of Azoth, which sponsors everything we do here at Think Big and at Advices Radio. So if you guys want to check out all the great nootropics that they have, you can go to our description. We have links down there to the Amazon, links to getazoth.com, and you can check their products out there. And of course, use our code ADVICES10. Prady, thank you so much for taking the time to help educate us about another nootropic.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it, man.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time.